Hello, everyone. I'm here to talk to you a little bit about productivity tips for DAO operators. I am at a DAO that at one point had $1.5 billion in its treasury. Today, it's around 60 to 70 million. I help lead partnerships. If you're not very familiar with Gitcoin, I'll tell you a little bit about it. But unlike probably most of the people who are here to tell you how amazing DAOs are, I plan to shit on them quite a bit. They're just not the dream utopia we like to talk about yet. So Gitcoin was founded in 2017 with the intention of helping fund digital public goods. We do that through quadratic funding. So we help to gather grants to be able to put it in the hands of open source software developers. And oftentimes it's for projects that are either too early to be venture invested, or potentially they're building things that aren't going to ever be venture investable, but we need the roads, bridges, and tunnels for Web3 to be built, regardless of whether or not they're all going to be businesses. And this is something we've very successfully been doing for quite some time now. The way that our round structures are set up is that we have a Web3 ecosystem main round where the parameters are quite broad and sort of anyone can apply. We have ecosystem rounds where partners like Polygon will come to us and say that there are certain parameters of things that they're looking to build, and they'll give us 100K or 250K, and we use our architecture to help them put that grant money in the hands of the builders who are building things along what they're looking for. And then in recent times, we also set up cause rounds, which are things that are Web3, non-Web3, on-chain, off-chain, but just things that we started to see that people in the ecosystem cared about a lot. We're running our grants round at the moment, actually. And this round, we have the climate round, advocacy, meaning crypto regulatory advocacy. We have decentralized science, and then we have a diversity, equity, and inclusion round as well. To date, since 2017, we've given about $70 million as of Thursday out in money to open source software developers, and the success of this would probably be better than any of the VCs ever. Uniswap, Optimism, Zapper, 1inch, Bankless, Yearn, Dune. I mean, like, so many of the billion-dollar companies in this space were originally grantees. Unfortunately, Tornado Cash. But this has been a very successful attempt. We're well known within the ecosystem. All of this to say, like, when it comes to DAOs, we've been established a long time. We've been doing great things. We've worked with everybody. We have a great reputation. For our 14th grants round, which ran in June, we collectively raised $3.2 million in our matching pool, and that was from partners like Polygon and Coinbase and a bunch of other people. And then over the course of 2 weeks, we had about 600,000 individual contributions made by over 44,000 individual contributors who gave out about 1.7 million over this 2 weeks. So in that time, to about 1,250 grantees, we gave out about $5 million, and we do this on a quarterly basis with that going on now. Right now, like I said, we have one of our grants rounds running, and as you can see, massive, massive partners, Andreessen Horowitz, Coinbase, Polygon, like literally everybody. But having done this, I've gotten to see how DAOs are not like at all what people are saying they are. Maybe in the future they will be, but to start, like from a personal finances and taxes perspective, the reality of working in DAOs is absolutely that there are a lot of people who are already being targeted by the IRS, rightfully or wrongfully so, and there's going to be a lot more in time to come. Oftentimes, many of the people working in our space are young people, fresh out of college, Web3 native. They have no idea how to set up a corporation. They have no idea that they should have an accountant. They have no idea what a tax planner is. They're not using QuickBooks. They're not separating their business and their personal expenses. Maybe some of them don't even know that they're supposed to actually do their taxes when January comes. I've already seen it in our DAO. There are people who, especially based on the interpretation of how their taxes work, are already in debt to the IRS in a massive way. I think one of the things that DAOs are really going to need to do better is, as they onboard contributors, is really start working at figuring out whether it's an in-house or outsourced way of being able to sit down with contributors and let them know that they're essentially 1099 contractors with even less rights who need to set up their own corporations and start taking care of these things so that we can make sure that these contributors are actually in a better position as we move forward. Another place is governance. Governance sucks. I know everyone loves to talk about like decentralized governance and how it's so amazing and it's this great thing, but forums aren't centralized in any way, so you're having to figure out how to spend time going to different forums and look at the different proposals and the different comments of every different place, whether you're on Gitcoin or Lido or Uniswap, and it's a miserable experience. Everything ends up being communicated to people on Discord. Anyone who here is on Discord from Web3 knows that you're in too many servers with way too many notifications, and all you ever really do is just mark as read after you right-click, so you don't have to just see like that red notification there. Like that's what all of us do, right? And so then there's Snapshot, which like while like the ability to vote is great, like who's actually voting? And so we're seeing similar issues that we see here in the United States where we have representative democracy, but like no one's actually going out to vote even though like they actually can. And the only time people end up caring about the vote is when something ends up happening that doesn't go the way that they like, but until that moment, like no one gives a shit, right? And like we've all seen it. Hiring and talent sucks. Like there's no good Web3 recruiting agencies. I think people are really working hard at this because of the massive opportunity that's in it. But like, do you bring the Web2 people in who know nothing about the culture and nothing about like Web3, nothing about the ecosystem, but like at least they respond to emails in a timely manner, right? Like just being real, as opposed to going to Web3 native youngsters who like simple stuff like waking up on time, responding to emails in a proper way, like understanding that there are simple business practices that require common sense. And oftentimes like they don't have those. And without having the ability to be able to mentor young people in an office in a simple way that you would in the past, none of them really know what they're supposed to do. So you end up being in this position where it's already hard to find talent. Like you don't go on LinkedIn for top Web3 talent. You have to go to Twitter. You have to be able to like virtue signal and know and be connected to the right people. And things are going off of clout where like who follows who on Twitter is one of the best markers that you're able to use as to whether or not you should hire someone, which like absolutely isn't the right way to go about hiring. And so from the perspective of being able to actually take an organization from when it's little to scale it up, like there's no simple ways yet to be able to actually go about doing any of this. And I've seen this across all of our divisions because we have about 140 contributors across marketing, ops, fundraising, whatever it would be. And it's nearly impossible. Like the recommendation system is sort of what we're using. And so while we say to everybody from the outside that there's this like decentralized amazing way where, you know, it's so open and free and fair, like really what ends up happening is that like you end up having this situation where it's just usually a friend of a friend who comes in and you're like, I think they could do the job. Organizational principles. I think it's great that we like to talk about having no hierarchy is great. In ways, the old versions of hierarchy where things are like set up in a way that there's like 100 layers of bullshit middle managers is absolutely not the way. But setting up so that there's no bosses whatsoever really doesn't work well. You end up having people who don't know what they're doing, who don't know what they're supposed to do, they don't know who they report to. And one of the biggest things I've seen is whether or not we accept that there are no clear hierarchies in any of these things. There tend to be unclear hierarchies, sort of shadowy ones that develop where you find, like, you see someone and you're like, yeah, that person's really important in the DAO, but we just call them a DAO contributor. I'm a DAO contributor, but it's very clear that they have a social presence, people listen to them. And so this is one of the things as we've been going about it is we've been trying to set it up where, yeah, we don't like titles, but like we need to have some sort of way to set up KPIs that people have to be able to be accountable to, and then people they have to be accountable to so that we can set things up in a way that over time scale, because when you start getting to 50, 90, 150 people, like you simply can't do it that like it's just a free-for-all where everyone does what they want to do just because of how inefficient it ends up being in double work, lack of communication, miscommunication, just like across the board. This is one of the things that like drives me nuts, and I've never worked in like a traditional corporate structure, but like simple common sense says we still need this stuff. Communication. Fucking sucks. I don't know if I'm allowed to say fuck. Discord is a mess. We're on Telegram, we're on Gmail, we're on Twitter, we're on Notion, we're on Google Drive. There's an overwhelming amount of information that's happening across a bunch of tools that are not Web3 native whatsoever. I spoke to someone here who's building a better Discord called Console, which is like just more Web3 native with the MetaMask sign-in. I know everybody is building DAO tooling at the moment. None of the DAO tooling is stuff that I've really seen yet, but just when it comes to being able to do this, anybody who's in Web3 is completely overwhelmed with any of the stuff that they actually have to take a look at. And again, it just goes back to you end up marking everything as red so you don't have to look at it, because there's just no like effective way for you to actually get understanding of what's going on, what you're supposed to know, and then you have no boss who's telling you anyway. Legal compliance. Another thing, completely sucks. What is a DAO? Where is it registered? Do you have paperwork? Like, are you protected? Like, one of the things that we're working at Gitcoin now is setting up simple agreements so that we can make sure in the future, if any lawsuits do end up coming about against the DAO, that people who individually work there aren't going to end up being liable in any sort of lawsuits. In a traditional corporation, this isn't something you have to think about whatsoever, whereas right now, because of the gray areas of what's a DAO, where do you incorporate it, where is it going to be, British Virgin Islands, Cayman Islands, Wyoming, whatever it is, like, how do you set this up so that you can have a straightforward understanding? Like, anyone can go set up a LLC, go to LegalZoom, they have a very clear understanding of what they're supposed to do, and if they don't, they can call somebody who can tell them. I've dealt with all of the law firms who charge you $1,000 plus an hour, and all of them give you different information. Like, it's based on their interpretation of new shit that's coming out. None of them actually know what they're talking about. So you're usually paying a bunch of people just hoping you don't end up getting fucked. And then DAO Contributor Protections. I mean, this goes back a little bit to what I was talking about earlier, but like, as a full-time contributor, you're basically a full-time employee who's a 1099, who doesn't have the protections of a 1099, and you're working in startups without much of the upside of startups. So you're not a W-2, you don't have health care, like, you don't have maternity, paternity leave in a real way. You there's no equity. Like, where's the upside of working in a DAO in the way that you decide to go to an early stage startup? I have not seen many DAOs that are working at figuring out how to give token vesting. Sure, that the investors get it and the founders get it, but the people who are coming on board, part-time versus full-time, and just everything that comes with it, like, how do you set, are you supposed to just buy your own tokens? And then, you know, when you're paid in these native tokens, are you supposed to just keep them? Like, what about actually having to make a living and you have to sell them? And then that goes back to the earlier thing of, like, how do you get taxed? So, like, everything around actually protecting the people that are working in these DAOs is a shit show. And it's one of the things that I think about, even out of all of these things, quite often, is because what are we going to do to be able to actually protect our best workers, and how do we set it up in a way that we can actually get this moving forward? Like, sure, Facebook or whichever organization we want to rag on, like, isn't perfect, but they got a lot of these things right that we don't yet. And I think as much as it's great, like the last panel was talking about, finding the rebellious people, like, sure, it's like great to have a group of anarchists together who want to, like, tear the world to shit, but like, after you do that, like, how are you going to rebuild it? And those are the kinds of things that I'm finding way less people are actually taking time thinking about, is how do you build back a better world? Like, it's fun to burn things down, but like, what's next? I'm done early. Happy to take questions. Feel free to send me an email, message me on Telegram, find me after. I know that this was completely different. I was supposed to actually give, like, productivity tips, but like, as I was sitting here, like, I've just found, I've been in crypto since 2013. I started writing about it for the Huffington Post then. In 2014, as a joke, I tried launching something called Kim Coindashian. So, like, arguably the first social, arguably the first social token. I got a cease and desist from the Kardashian family after I got a bunch of press. In 2019, I was trying to raise money for a GameFi company, and the top investors, which I won't name, literally told me that you either do gaming or you do crypto. You don't do both. Ironic, considering where we're at now. In 2017, I did ICO stuff. I had a venture-backed Web3 company last year where I got to learn how shitty venture capitalists are when you go with the wrong VC when it comes to being able to do token sales, and how they dump your tokens and then bother you at the beginning of each month asking you why the token price isn't going up, not giving you any time to actually build your product, so you're just focused on being able to figure out how to raise the token price all the time, which leads to more scams, which is what we see happening all the time. And so very well versed in this space, have been doing this for quite a long time, and weirdly enough, despite this talk, quite an optimist about where we're going, but I just want to hear and see more people having conversations about how we better this. I'm saying the unfortunate part is what's going on. Absolutely. Tornado Cash, the situation is terrible. I actually need to today finalize putting together a blog post that we're going to be putting out from Gitcoin, and our crypto regulatory advocacy round has people like EFF and Coin Center and the Blockchain Association, and we put money in their hands so that they can actually fight the fight of making sure that things like this don't continue to happen. Anyone have any questions?
Passport and how decentralized identity plays such a big role in like funding different community grants.
Honestly, I wish I could. I like only last week have started sitting down with Passport. I've been focused more on our Grants 2.0 protocol because I end up working, my job ends up being working with our partners and doing the fundraising efforts. And so speaking to them about, we're going to be moving away from our centralized grants program at the moment so that sort of anyone's going to be able to go on and use that protocol. And for the most part, I've been like bringing Starkware and Arbitrum and Optimism and like the partners to being able to figure out the Grants 2.0 stuff. But I was at the DeSci conference at MIT over the weekend, and everyone started talking about asking me around this, and I was like, man, I got to sit down and actually take a look at this. So, sorry. Yeah.
From your perspective, like, what are certain things that a DAO, right, like, addresses or fixes that a corporation, right, like, all these, the entire planetary basis as organized around the institution of a corporation. So now we are, as you mentioned, you might argue, discovery of DAO. Yeah. So what are some fundamental things from your perspective and your experience of crypto you see DAOs better than the corporation?
I think it's awesome that from like a completely frictionless way, you can have your like made up money that's like technically worth something and is actually worth something because a bunch of people decide that, and that you can set it up that in an easy, frictionless way, you can work with people around the globe, especially for what it means, like my family's from Pakistan, to be able to set it up such that you can hire people in different countries and be able to empower people around the world and get access to talent from everywhere without having to have them like be sitting in New York or Los Angeles, right? And so I think that's one of the things that we really have an interesting possibility to actually change the landscape with, in terms of being able to find talent from around the globe and then empower them to actually like make their lives and their families' lives better. That's one of the things that I find really exciting about it. I mean, we see so many good things happening in India. So I'd say for me, first and foremost, that's like at the top of the list of just making the ability to hire and pay people globally completely frictionless.
I was going to say, just want to let everyone give a round of applause for Azeem. We need some good criticism out here, and somebody's got to do it. So thank you, man. Thank you.